Hey everybody, coming in for a Q&A video today. Got a whole list of questions, a lot of recipe questions about, egg white bread, about the wraps or crepes, about Sibo yogurt and a few other things. So we are going to get into all those questions here in a second. Before we get started, let's chat about Armra Colostrum, who is the sponsor of today's video. In case you have never heard of colostrum, it is a bioactive whole food that is produced by all mammals in the first 2 to 3 days of life, like after a baby is born. In the case of Armra Colostrum, it comes from cows. It is a powerhouse of functional nutrients, peptides, minerals, antibodies, antimicrobials, and antioxidants. And all of these can help support so many different systems in our bodies. Armra starts with the purest surplus colostrum that is harvested after the calves have gotten what they need. It's sustainably sourced from grass-fed cows that are raised on family farms in the US, and they use a unique low-heat pasteurization process that protects the more than 400 bioavailable nutrients in the colostrum and delivers them in their most pure and potent forms. As I've been working through thyroid issues and hormone balance over the last several months, a big priority to me is to avoid the hair loss that is so common with hormonal issues, and research suggests that colostrum can support and reactivate hair follicle stem cells, which is amazing, strengthen the scalp microbiome, and help fuel hair growth down to the cellular level. Armra Colostrum has a special offer for all of my viewers. You can get 15% off of your first order just by using my link, tryarmra.com/indigo. That's TRYARMRA.com/indigo. Thanks so much to Armra Colostrum for sponsoring the video today, and now we can dive into the questions. We'll go ahead and get started with the bread questions. Still one of the most popular kinds of questions I get on my channel. First one is from In-Laws Attic. It says, will it make a good French toast? Will it absorb the egg? And would it take a poached egg on top, soak in the yolk? And the answer to that is yes. It does soak it. It makes great French toast. You can soak it in the scrambled egg. It works great. It's not exactly the same as regular bread because it's not regular bread, but it does soak in. And so I really enjoy like an Eggs Benedict type dish where you have some kind of bread or roll that's one of the egg white bread recipes. You put, ham or turkey or whatever meat you want, even sausage would be good, a poached egg and hollandaise sauce, of course, which is a great thing to use up any yolks you might have left over if you do one of the recipes that has fresh egg whites in it. So make your egg white bread with the fresh egg whites and then use your leftover yolks to make hollandaise sauce. And that's going to be a match made in heaven. So I say, yes, absolutely. Don't expect it to taste exactly like French toast. I mean, this is not something you should have to say, but I feel like I do need to say it every single egg white bread recipe or anytime I'm talking about it. It doesn't taste exactly like regular bread. It is different than regular bread. I think it's good in and of itself without having to be exactly the same as regular bread. But, don't expect that you're going to bite into it and say, I can't even tell that this is not made out of wheat. If we were able to make something like that was healthy, high protein, had all the macros of the egg white bread and tasted exactly like regular bread, we would be gazillionaires because that's what the world needs. Next question is from Yvette Santana asking, have you tried oat fiber in the egg white bread? I don't want to spend extra money on starches. So the answer is yes. I actually have a whole video that's all about testing out oat fiber in the egg white bread, and it worked great in the recipes where I use fiber in the bread. I don't use fiber in every recipe. Fiber gives a really unique texture to the bread, and I typically use the fiber in like buns and rolls, and not in my loaf breads, although some people do, and I have before, and it's good. It's just a different kind of texture. And so if there is one of my recipes, at least, that has psyllium husk or bamboo fiber or any of the other fibers in there, if you use oat fiber in place of that same, measurement, it should work out just fine. I've had no issues switching, like mixing and matching different fibers in the bread. So if there's a recipe that calls for a fiber, you can assume if it's one of my recipes, you can use any one of those different fiber options. Next question is asking about yeast and asking, has anyone replaced the yeast, like the bread yeast, with nutritional yeast? So this question, it depends on which recipe you're doing. Some recipes just have yeast in there as a flavoring, and so it's not actually like doing any work in the chemistry of the bread. It's just there to get that yeasty smell, yeasty flavor. And if that is the case, then you can absolutely do nutritional yeast instead. You could do both. The yeast and the nutritional yeast can just be a flavoring in the bread. And a lot of people do use nutritional yeast in their breads. There's a lot of recipes out there with nutritional yeast, and some people like it more than others. It's, one of those personal preference things. So you can totally add the nutritional yeast along with the yeast or in place of the yeast if it's just being used as a flavoring. There are a few recipes where the yeast is actually rising in the bread. And so if your recipe that you're looking at calls for like 1 hour of letting the loaf sit in a warm place, like in a dehydrator or in front of a warm oven or something like that, that means that the yeast is actually doing the work of growing and causing the nice bubbly texture in the bread. In that case, you cannot use nutritional yeast in place of the bread yeast. Nutritional yeast doesn't have that same effect. It's I don't think it's a live yeast anymore. It's more just a flavoring, kind of has a cheesy flavor, very savory flavor, and it's chock full of B vitamins. It's really good for you in a lot of ways. So it's a great thing to, have in your diet, but it's not going to cause bread to rise. It's just a completely different product than the quick rise or the regular bread yeast. Next question is about pans to use for the egg white bread. Do you think silicone bread pans might not be good? That's what I have. Maybe they don't get hot enough. Has anyone done this recipe with silicone pans? So I have done the egg white bread in silicone pans before. I have, some older videos where I did like a couple small, my silicone pans are like small loaf size. And so with one of my regular loaf bread recipes, I can make 2 mini loaves in these little silicone pans, and I can link them down below if you want to check them out on Amazon. I don't think they were very expensive, but silicone does work just fine for the egg white bread. The thing I have found is actually opposite of what you mentioned. I feel like the silicone gets hotter than I use aluminum pans, so it might be different with glass or different material, but for me, I find that if I'm using a silicone pan, I need to reduce the temperature of the oven or reduce the time, or else I'll get too brown of a crust on the outside and it just kind of gets overdone. So I typically stick to the aluminum when I'm doing a loaf, and that the time and the temperature that I have on my recipes works well for that. So if you do choose to use silicone pans, make sure that you are checking it early and you kind of get a feel for how the silicone bakes your loaf of bread, and you might have to adjust the time or the temperature. If this is a recipe that you're making regularly, you'll kind of figure out what works for your oven and for the pan material that you end up using. Next question is about my protein breading recipe. This is still one of my absolute favorite recipes that I've ever created. It's super versatile. It's one of those like staple recipes where you can use in all kinds of different applications. And so it's one that I absolutely love. But the question was, I wonder if this would work without the egg white powder. So the three ingredients in like the base ingredients in the breading is egg white powder, pork rind crumbs, and gelatin powder. And those three in combination just work magic. The end result, I feel like, is the closest I've found to a true like panko breadcrumb taste and feel. My kids love it. They're not keto, and there are a lot of, keto things where they'll tolerate a little bit or they'll taste and be like, oh yeah, it's fine. But this is a recipe that they eat and they request. And even my daughter decided to make some regular chicken strips. She's like, I'm gonna, work hard and make this fancy recipe of chicken strips that she had found, and it had, regular wheat flour in it and everything. We use einkorn flour at our house. It's, a little bit less gluten. I feel a little bit better about it than just regular bleached flour from the store or all-purpose flour from the store. And anyways, she went through this whole recipe and made these chicken strips. And in the end, she was like, I don't think I'm going to make that recipe again. I think your protein breading is better. And so now whenever she wants to make chicken strips, she uses my protein breading. So that just makes my heart super happy. Anyways, back to the question about it working without the egg white powder. So you can bread chicken strips or anything with just pork rind crumbs. That's been, a staple in the keto, low carb, and even carnivore world for a long time. You can, toss whatever you're breading into some beaten egg and then throw it into pork rind crumbs and cook it. And it's good. Like, it's definitely good. I think the egg white powder and the gelatin work together to give a better mouthfeel and also to help the breading adhere to whatever it is, like the chicken that you're cooking. Because a lot of keto breading recipes, you cook it up and it's like a breading sleeve that can just slide right off. And it's like, gooey chicken underneath. And it's not fantastic. But the egg white powder and the gelatin together with the pork rind crumbs adheres to the chicken. It like glues to the chicken where there's no like sleeve effect at all. So that's one great thing about it. And then also the powdered egg whites, what they kind of do is coat the pork rind crumbs, and the pork rind crumbs are pretty greasy. They have a fair amount of fat in them, but the egg white powder kind of coats them in a powdery texture and absorbs some of that grease. And that powdery texture coating the pork rind crumbs is what makes the breading have more of a panko crumb feel. It's more of a starchy feel because you have that powdered egg white on there. When you just have pork rind crumbs, they stay greasy and they just don't quite have that same starchy feel, if that makes sense. You have to try it to understand. But there is magic. And I don't know exactly all of the things the three ingredients do in the recipe, but my perception is that the gelatin helps the breading get crispy and stay crispy. So it's like the pork rind crumbs provide the base. They provide a really good flavor with, pork skin, how can it taste bad? And then the egg white powder coats the pork rind crumbs to give that starchy feel and also to glue the breading to the thing that you're breading so it doesn't just come off as a sleeve. And then the gelatin added in there allows the breading to get crispy and then stay crispy. A lot of different breadings, even, regular with wheat flour breadings, you cook them and they're crispy for half a minute and then they get, soft and gooey. This one, because of the gelatin and maybe also because of the egg white powder, it stays crispy for a good amount of time. I think it does a really good job of that. So anyways, all those three ingredients work together to make the magic that the breading is. And so if you take out the egg white powder, you're not going to get as good of a result. You can bread chicken with gelatin plus pork rind crumbs, and it's still probably going to taste fine, but you're not going to get all of those same effects and all that magic that the protein breading recipe will get you. Next question is about my crepe recipe. So I have two I call one crepes and I call one DIY egg white wraps, similar to the Egg Life wraps you can get in the store. And the crepes use fresh egg whites and gelatin. That's the two main ingredients in there. And then you can add, salt or other seasonings or whatever you want to dress it up. But the basic ingredients are the egg whites, fresh egg whites, and gelatin. And then the DIY egg white wraps are water, egg white powder, and gelatin. And those make a thicker wrap, very similar to the Egg Life wraps you can get in the store, but they don't have xanthan gum in them. And they're 100% animal based because they don't have xanthan gum and they have the gelatin. And I use a beef gelatin. So very carnivore friendly. And they hold up really well as like tortillas or taco shells, things like that. Although you can use them as crepes as well. I just feel like the fresh egg white ones are a little bit thinner and more like a thin pancake versus a tortilla. So that's the difference between those. But the question was on the crepes where I use fresh egg whites. And the question was, any reason we can't use the whole egg? And the answer to that is no, there is no reason to not use the whole egg. It works, like the recipe works with whole eggs, and you can adjust the ratio of yolks to whites to get however you like it. In my carnivore pasta recipe, I used some yolk. I forget the ratio, but I used some egg white and then some whole egg in there. And so they're a little bit more yellow, kind of like an egg noodle. And you can totally do that and it works. The recipe works. You still get a really nice wrap. The thing to keep in mind is the more yolk you put into the wraps, the more it's going to taste eggy and more like a scrambled egg, flat scrambled egg. With the egg whites and the gelatin alone, it has very little flavor, which is kind of what you want in a wrap. If you're going to be making like a lunch wrap with sandwich meat and veggies and stuff, you don't really want it to taste like scrambled egg. You want it to just be kind of a blank slate that takes on whatever flavor you put into it. So I recommend, depending on what you're using the wraps for, if you're making a breakfast burrito and you're already going to be putting some scrambled eggs in it, then there's no reason not to just use whole eggs. You could even go farther with the ratio and have more yolks, like have whole eggs and then add extra yolks in there to get it to be higher fat. It is going to taste very eggy, very yolky at that point. The yolk has a stronger flavor than the whites alone. So it really depends on what you're wanting to do with the wraps and what your preference is, but you can, adjust the amount of fat based on how many yolks you put in there. And I do like a little bit of the yolk in the pasta recipe because it does give that, egg noodle look and feel. So you can adjust it however you want. Just keep in mind the taste will change a bit. The next question is also about the egg white wraps and the crepe recipes. Says, can you tell us exactly what the gelatin does? So yeah, it's without the gelatin, it would just be a flat egg. And sometimes I get comments from people saying, oh, this is just an omelet. And you're like, well, I mean, no, because you don't usually put gelatin in omelets. Like I've never done that before. And the gelatin has an effect on the end product. And that effect is just that it makes it more pliable without letting it rip. It gives it more structure and it makes it pliable. So it's more like a tortilla or a wrap. If you've ever just made a flat egg and tried to use it as a tortilla, it can work in a certain way, but it rips very easily. It's very fragile. And it's just, difficult to work with. It's just egg. But if you add that gelatin, it kind of binds it together. It gives it more structure and it just works better. And it also gives a different mouthfeel. So I don't think it feels like when I'm using an egg white wrap, it doesn't feel like to me that I'm just eating a piece of egg white with stuff in it. It feels more like a wrap. So structure, pliability, mouthfeel, it gives all of that. Last couple of questions are about Sibo and the Sibo yogurts that I've done. I've done a lot of videos on different probiotic yogurts. They were created by Dr. William Davis. Anyways, I'll put the info about all of those in the cards and then the description if you want to, get more info about that. But question about the yogurt. I'm new to Sibo yogurt. Does anyone know if it's okay to make it with only 2 strains? I could only get the L. reuteri and the L. gasseri, as the other one is out of stock. Not sure how long I'll have to wait. Would like to start making the yogurt as soon as possible. Or is it better to just make the 1 strain L. reuteri since I don't have all 3 strains now? So the Super Sibo yogurt that she's talking about, that Dr. William Davis has developed, it has 3 strains in it, and they all work together in various ways to help your body work through small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And the star of the show is the L. reuteri, and you can make the L. reuteri on its own. Actually, you can make all 3 of them on their own. I've done all 3 of them. It's really fascinating how different they each taste. The different probiotics have just different flavor, and so and texture even. And so it's really interesting to just see how different they are with just that one little change. But anyways, all that to say, you can make all 3 of them separately. You can make 2 of them together and 1 of them separately. You can make the other 2 together and the other one separately. You can make them however you like. There are different temperatures that each of the strains prefer. So what Dr. Davis did with the 3 strain yogurt is he kind of found a happy medium for all of them, where it's the temperature is not going to kill any of them, but they'll all, still grow. But if you're only making 1 or even 2, you might go look at the individual temperature range of that strain and then adjust the temperature that you use when you culture it to that. Just because, you might be able to have it at a little bit higher of a temperature, or you might need to have it a little lower of a temperature to get the most perfect results, instead of just doing the happy medium for all 3. But that's not even necessary either, because even if you just use the happy medium number that he gives for that recipe, the 2 will still work out just fine. So answer the question, you can totally do 2 at once. And then when you do end up getting the 3rd supplement that you're going to use to culture, you can take 2 tablespoons of the yogurt that you made for the starter for those 2 strains, and then you can add the supplement for the 3rd into your batch and make a batch like that. And so once you have the other supplements, you can combine them with what you've already made, and then you'll have your 3 strain batch. But all 3 of them have amazing benefits. Even if they're not all together, you don't have to take them all together to get benefits from each individual one. They're really incredible strains, incredible things these probiotics can do. And, to get some or all is going to benefit you in many ways, I'm sure. Last question we're going to address today is, how is your Sibo or IMO? I looked for a follow-up video to the one you did last year, but couldn't find anything. I've talked about my Sibo in lots of different videos, but I may not have one that is exactly like the ending. This is my Sibo treatment results, but I have shared tons about where I'm at with my Sibo, and basically, and so we'll do that again here in this video. Basically, I have no symptoms of Sibo. Every time I got a breath test throughout my treatment, it always got better. And I got to the point where my symptoms were just gone. I don't get the major bloating that I used to get. I tolerate pretty much everything I try to eat. It doesn't give me digestive issues anymore. I feel pretty confident saying that my Sibo is gone. I no longer have Sibo. It is tricky because, some people don't put a lot of weight in the ways that we have to test Sibo. So, to say a definitive, like, I am Sibo free, like, I don't know if I can really say that, but as far as how I feel, I basically have none of the digestive issues that I had before I did the Sibo protocols. And I will put a link to my whole Sibo playlist in there. There's a video where I detailed exactly what I was doing, like all of the antimicrobials. I went through about 3 rounds. I switched out antimicrobials each round because you don't want your body to get used to what you're doing. And it got worse. I always say this, it got worse before it got better. It took about 6 months. There was a time where my digestive issues were massive in there, but after pushing through and getting all the way through it, on the other side, it's like magically different. I get to choose what I eat now based on what I want to eat and what I choose is healthy for my body, but it's no longer based on what's going to make me feel horrible the next day or, the digestive problems. I don't have to make decisions based on my digestive issues anymore. Like I have total freedom to pick and choose the kinds of food that I want to eat now based on all different criteria. So totally feel free from all of that insanity, which I'm super thankful for. My diet now is so varied, so much more varied than it was, a couple years ago. I had really narrowed my diet down almost to carnivore and still was having worsening symptoms and things that were not getting resolved by, just going narrower and narrower. And having gone through this gut healing protocol and SIBO eradicating protocol, I just feel like night and day difference. So very thankful for that. Like I said, I do have that whole playlist where I detailed everything, week by week. So you can check that out if you're interested in all of the nitty-gritty details. But that is going to be it for this Q&A video. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out. Thanks for chatting. And if you have any other questions for another Q&A video, go ahead and put them in the comments. And I will see you again in the next one.